What is the biggest, most messed up secret your family has? Story 1. I cared for my mother and stepdad after they were both nearly fatally injured. My stepdad sustained many more injuries than my mother, and I cared for him and her for years through multiple surgeries. We had always been close, but the accident bonded us in a whole new way. While he was still injured, we became involved in an intimate relationship. We never went all the way, and ultimately he ended it because of overwhelming guilt. He was on so much pain medication at the time that I believe his inhibitions were dramatically lowered. He told me that if it continued, he might off himself. Throughout his whole life, he had been a very moral person, so being involved in something like this was something he could not handle. I, on the other hand, can't imagine going back to a normal relationship. I think about it every day and just can't move on. The hardest part is that I feel no guilt. I know what I did would crush my mother, but still, I don't feel guilty. Before we continue, do us a quick favor, smash that like button, and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. My grandmother had a man come and say, my mom and all of my aunts, over and over and over for years. My two sisters, older brother and I were conceived this way. When my grandfather found out, he was going to tell the police and confront my father and grandmother. The next day, he had a diving accident and passed away. There is zero proof that it was foul play, but we all know what really happened. My aunt ended up marrying my father, and the family covered up what happened. Story 3. My dad offed his own father. His father was a harsh man who used to beat them regularly. They lived on a dairy farm, him and his 5 siblings. When my dad was 18 or 19, he'd had enough. He hid a gun in the barn the night before. In the morning, he went out with his father like usual to start milking the cows. No one else in the house was awake. According to him, his dad came at him with a pitchfork, and in self-defense, he shot him. He threw the body on the tractor, drove it into the woods, and buried it. Still, no one knew. He went back, finished milking the cows, and returned to the house. When his sister asked where their dad was, he just said, "He's never coming back." Eventually, the police got involved and found the body. He was still a minor and claimed it was self-defense. From what I've been told, the details were murky. He ended up spending time in a juvenile facility until he turned 18, then went on with his life. What disturbs me most is that he grew up, had a bunch of kids, and beat the hell out of us. He raised us on a farm too. When I was 7, he got angry because I did a bad job feeding the pigs. As punishment, he made me climb into a 5-foot-wide, 6-inch-deep trough of manure and do push-ups. I had to go low enough for my face to touch it. That kind of thing wasn't rare. It was constant, along with regular beatings. And by his own logic, if I'd ever turned on him, would I have been justified? I never asked him that. I don't speak to him anymore. He pretends he's some Christian saint, but he's a monster. Story 4. I have distant cousins who married each other. They are first cousins to each other. They had a child together, who was born with severe mental and physical handicaps. After testing, it was determined that they both had recessive genes, and if they had more children, there was a high chance that future children would have similar issues. Due to religious reasons, they believe that any child is a gift from God's and also that they have to have as many kids as possible. Birth control is not an option. They had 3 more kids after this. 2 more have severe handicaps, though not as severe as the oldest. 1 kid was born normal. They are also dirt poor, meaning they cannot afford to put these kids in a proper care facility or ensure they are taken care of after the parents leave this earth. I guess God will just figure that piece out. Story 5. I was SA'd by my father for about 5 years. When I finally told my mother, her response was that she would pray for me. She never said a word to him about it. So I gave her an ultimatum: either I moved out at 18, or I was calling the police. I ended up having to return about a year later for a weekend visit, bringing a roommate with me. My roommates knew what had happened, so one of them always came with me whenever I had to go back to the house. During that visit, my dad cornered me in the kitchen, right in front of that roommate. I grabbed a large chopping knife and told him, "Anything that touches me comes off." I guess he finally took the hint after that. My dad had always been a closet predator and a furry, I lost count of how many times I walked out of my room and caught him frantically trying to click away from weird corn on the computer. Also, my parents were swapsters, and my mom got pregnant by someone else, so my older brother is actually only my half-brother. He has 6 to 8 other half-brothers that he has no idea about. Both of my parents told me this separately, but to this day, neither of them has told him. And because my brother wasn't my dad's biological child, they decided to have me a sort of guilt baby. So, I only exist because of my mom's remorse. I was treated like crap for most of my life, right up until around 17 or 18. Meanwhile, my brother, who turned out to be a repeat felon, an alcoholic, and a total jerk, has always been treated like royalty. I also found out that most of my dad's family were in one way or another deeply disturbed. There were abusers, violent offenders, and even murderers among them, some of whom believed in Wiccan black magic. Since I was considered the only true blood heir, they wanted to teach me their ways. In my late 18th year, I got pregnant. Not long after, my dad took off, thank God. Story 6. My cousin has a mail-order bride. My cousin, I'll call him Jack, is a real piece of crap. He couldn't get a girl in real life, because he's a misogynist. So, Jack goes online to get a girl from the Philippines. The poor girl eventually gets to move to our country to live with Jack in his mother's basement. They stayed there for a few years, but he eventually had to move away for work. His wife still lives in his mom's basement, but occasionally goes to visit Jack to clean his place or sleep with him. We all know that Jack is verbally and emotionally, and most likely physically abusive to this girl. Jack may have other mental issues. He acts like a legitimate sociopath sometimes. No one talks about it though, except my mother and I discuss it in private. We hope the poor girl leaves Jack soon. This girl was not forced into the country or brought here illegally. She came of her own volition. She got married and had to wait for citizenship. About a year or two before legally entering the country, she wanted to leave the Philippines. There are a variety of websites that allow North American men to meet women from the Philippines and other countries too that they can potentially marry. It's not illegal, although there are illegal ways of getting a mail-order bride. Jack chose the completely legal route. This started several years ago when I was too young to fully understand all the complex problems in their relationship. And my relatives didn't tell me about all the problems going on because you don't tell kids that kind of crap. Last time I spoke with my mom, I told her that if Jack does anything to his wife in front of me that even borders on abuse, I'll call the cops. This girl wouldn't charge him even if the cops were called for his past actions, and she continues to choose to be married to him even though everyone in the family is telling her to get a divorce. The abuse is over now since they no longer live together and rarely see each other. I believe it really only occurred for a brief period of time when they lived together in their own house. Everyone tells her to get a divorce, but we can force her to get one. She's a grown woman making her own decisions and choices. With Jack far away and most of the time saying he wants to break up with her, and her not even liking him, no one can figure out why she remains married. She is very Catholic, which may be part of it. Her family in the Philippines put a lot of pressure on her to stay married. Even if she divorced Jack, she would still get a lot of support from our family. Story 7. My uncle, who expired a couple of years before I was born, was a part of Al-Qaeda. I only learnt this recently. My mom has lied to me so much about it. First, for most of my life, I heard he died in a car crash in Egypt. Then, during the Egyptian Revolution, my mom tells us Hosni Mubarak, the overthrown leader, had something to do with it. I learned from my aunt that he had a drug addiction and owed a ton of money to gangs in Texas. They trashed his car one time. My aunt walked in on him, tying a noose, and stopped him. She talked him out of it successfully. He was an atheist here. My aunt then went on to tell me that after the attempted self-harm, he turned very religious. He prayed, grew a beard, etc. My family is Arab, by the way. Most of us aren't that religious. Anyway, I then learnt that Hosni Mubarak was ordered to be offed. This is the white lie. My aunt told me that their uncle was jealous of their family and wanted money. So he said that my uncle was a rebel. This was in the 90s, I believe. She told me that their whole family, US citizens, called Congress, etc., and tried to get them to help, but nothing worked. I finally learnt the truth from my dad about 9 months ago. He wasn't a rebel, he was part of Al-Qaeda. According to my dad, he allegedly offed people. He was executed for terrorist activities. But to this day, I'm still not sure exactly what he did. My pretty secular aunt also has a son named after him. Story 8. My mom's side of the family is part of a big sort of mafia here in my country. My mom's uncle runs a security firm for building companies, but he's actually a scary guy who has done horrible things. My cousin was brought into this when he was 14. Someone knew who he was related to and tried to act tough by shaking him. My cousin was in the hospital for a while and never told the police anything. He did tell his dad though. The guy who shanked my cousin wasn't found. My cousin is now dating a dude who is one of the most feared guys in town. My girl cousin attacked a guy 14 times using a knife. My uncle paid off the jury and got her out of it. I've had people confront me for crap my family does, but I'm not some sap either. I have never and will never join the family game, but that doesn't mean I haven't had to do things I'm not proud of. My family screwed up. I'm just glad my mom had the common sense to keep me out of that the best she could. On the plus side, I get some pretty good powder and grass for the weekend. Story 9. My mom basically framed my dad for domestic abuse and tried to get him sent to jail when they were getting a divorce. She broke a door off its hinges, ripped up some of her clothes, and threw her stuff everywhere. Then she started a fight with my dad and ran into their room, slammed the door shut, and called the police. He was calm the entire time and was trying to reason with her, but she acted hysterical on the phone and said he was screaming, breaking things, and hitting her. He got taken away for a couple of days but didn't get arrested. Nothing ever happened to my mom despite the police knowing that she lied and falsely got my dad in trouble. Nobody knows that this happened, except for the three of us and the police. I think about it a lot, but there's nothing I can really do about it, so I don't talk about it with anyone. It didn't really scar me or anything, it just angered me a lot and drove a huge wedge between my mother and me. Thankfully, I don't live with her anymore and have started sorting out the issues I have with her in therapy. Story 10. My uncle is a farmer, so as you would expect, he is a bit of a boozer. He has some drunk driving charges and is suspended for the better part of the next decade. He is getting married to a former dancer. She's in her 20s and he's in his 50s. We think she is after his money. My parents think my uncle is a total screw-up that ran the farm into the ground. Sure, it was never as successful as it could be, but he made money, more than enough to live and afford a comfortable lifestyle. So, because my mother and her sister are spiteful and selfish, they are taking the farm away from my uncle and selling all of the assets that they can. It's technically owned by my grandma and was owned by my grandpa before he passed. They're taking that money and finding ways to cut him entirely out of the will, so they can take the several $1,000,000 worth of assets when my grandmother goes. They also want to cut out their other sister, who is the only rational sane aunt I have, because she and her ex-husband took some money from my grandfather to start an eventually failed business. To make matters worse, my mother is planning to keep those assets out of the marriage. That's precursor language for as soon as I can afford it, I'm filing for divorce. My parents have enough money to retire together but not separately. My mother is trying to cut my father out of retirement, the man who worked his butt off for us, all because he loved her. My cousin is hooked on drugs, has been for a few years, and is most likely a dancer. We suspect she has been in and out of jail, as well as rehab. And they ask why I don't want to visit them for Christmas. None of them think they are doing anything wrong, and I'm honestly at the point where I just don't want to associate with those kinds of poisonous, greedy people. Story 11. My family has a public image that is a pretty big sham. Everyone thinks we're a big, happy family, and everyone acts like it in a public sense. In a certain corner of the internet, my family is pretty well known, so it's a pretty public thing. In reality, my childhood was pretty screwed up. My dad was verbally, emotionally abusive and had severe anger issues. He once whipped my brother with a belt because he was peeing too loudly at night. I would always get yelled at because I was typing too loudly when I used the computer, stuff like that. He told my brother when he was 10, and me when I was 13, that he was too old for hugs. I cannot remember the last time that my father told me that he loved me. When I was 19, I was being SA'd at work. My parents grounded me for 2 years. The only thing they mentioned about my being S.A.'d was a snide comment from my mother implying that I was asking for it. For those 2 years, the slightest thing that happened was my fault in my father's eyes, and I got yelled at for it. And honestly, he's done that to every one of my siblings, and the only time it was presented as an issue was when he did it to my mother. He would accuse her of doing trivial things to mess with him, say leaving a door open, and get really mad about it. She would talk to them about it for hours every day and not say anything to him about it, and she would say things like, "I'm just hoping someone notices and says something to him about it." This was all normal growing up. My parents never expressed any other emotion other than my mother being submissive to whatever my father wanted and my father being angry. A close family friend told me a story once about how admirable it was that my parents waited to get married, instead of just getting married when my mom got pregnant with my brother, and about the small religious village they lived in. My brother was born when my mother was 19, and my parents met when she was 20. My mother lived in a city, and my dad lived in a village about an hour away. I found out when I was 13 that my brother and I have different birth fathers. How I found out was my mother mentioned that she and my father had met 15 years ago, and I stated, "But my brother is 16. She laughed in my face and said, "You didn't know?" No, because no one had ever mentioned it. My mother now complains that none of her children talk to her when something is wrong. I said to her that it's because they do not feel like they can talk to her. After all, she is very dismissive. My appendix ruptured a few years ago. It got to the point that I blacked out for 6 hours because I was in so much pain from eating half of a banana. I told her I was going to go to the hospital, and her response was, "If that's what you feel like you need to do, and you can mention anything even remotely involving feelings to my father because he will totally shut the conversation down." Her response was, "I thought our family was normal." My mother constantly complains about my younger sister to me because she will not actually ask my younger sister if something is wrong or talk to her about any issues she has. She does this because she knows I'll get pissed off enough to actually say something to my sister. I told her that if she wanted to repair the relationship she has with my sister, which is severely damaged, she would have to start talking to her about her feelings. Her response was, "But that's hard." My parents both did not have good home lives growing up, so they view mine and my siblings' lives as well. "You had it far better than we did growing up." It hurts because I do know my parents love me and all my siblings, but how we were raised was not normal. Talking about feelings is now so difficult for me that I cannot do so without bursting into tears because it is that stressful for me. I also have a very difficult time even putting my emotions into words because it was not something I was taught to do growing up. I was taught that I am only allowed to feel the way my parents want me to. And honestly, everyone just sees us as a great, happy family. Everyone has a pretty good sense of humor. So we're always joking. My mom's super fun. And everyone thinks she's great. Not that she isn't, but emotionally, it isn't a good time. If you say to her, "You haven't called me in a year," her response will be, "Well, you didn't call me either." Every time. If you point out something that needs to change, she will always shift the blame. Everyone thinks the family is picture perfect, normal, this and that, but it's really not. I keep encouraging my parents to go to therapy because they really need it, but they keep putting it off because they see no immediate issue. Everyone comments about how well-behaved, smart, funny, great, etc., etc., etc. My siblings and I are, but emotions are important. And if my parents read this, they would send me a stern email stating that I should talk to them directly instead of posting passive-aggressive comments about them to the internet. If I tried to tell them all of this, they would dismiss me and tell me that I had a far better life growing up than I did. Well, 2 wrongs don't make a right. There's also a history of schizophrenia on my father's side of the family that no one talks about. My dad swears his father is schizophrenic. And I have an uncle who has been diagnosed with it, and a cousin who was diagnosed when he was 8. We do not speak to anyone from my father's side of the family. Story 12. On my dad's side, he has a brother who became schizophrenic and offed himself back in the 70s. I didn't learn about it until I was like 18. No one has ever talked about him, and I've never seen a picture of him in my grandparents' house or anywhere. On my mom's side, every one of her 4 siblings is just waiting for my grandma to pass so they can get their inheritance. It's disgusting to watch. They never visit, always made excuses, and wouldn't drive less than 100 miles to see their father before he lost his mind to dementia and passed away. My mom has power of attorney and takes care of everything for my grandma, and even took her to a lawyer to get the will and trust legal stuff taken care of. Her siblings relentlessly try to undermine everything positive my mom is doing. They steal money. They steal medication from my 86-year-old grandma. For some reason, my aunt has had my grandma's wedding ring for over 3 years, getting it sized. She also has my grandma's photo album. Very shady people. The worst part, in my opinion though, when my mom got the trust legal work done, and basically ensured that when both parents die, everyone gets 1/5 of everything, my aunt seriously had the nerve to get mad at my mom for going through the bank to settle the estate, because there would be less money in the pot. Direct quote. Our Thanksgiving is small this year. Story 13. One of the biggest secrets is my younger brother. Even early in his life, my mom knew something was wrong with him. He showed no remorse when he did something wrong, and he only cared about himself. When he turned about 9, maybe, he started abusing me and my mom. It started with terrible emotional abuse that would cause everyone in the house to be miserable. It got worse as he got older, and he started becoming physically abusive. We had dogs, and one dog in particular, I absolutely adored. He would torture the dogs, especially the one I loved. He would hurt my dog in front of my face until I had to kick him, so he let him go, which broke my toe. He would destroy any possession of mine that I showed affection toward. He would even hit or kick my mom and me in public. He preferred kicking in the shins or punching in the stomach, mostly because it's easy to hide bruises in those places. The abuse got so bad that I had to move into my aunt's house for a while. During that time, my mom had him Baker Act. The absurd thing is, he was able to manipulate them into thinking there was nothing wrong with him except a case of depression. I was absolutely furious that these people couldn't see past the lies of a 14-year-old. He was released and came home, and I had to move back into the house because of ridiculous crap, despite not wanting to at all. Things went downhill from there, and after a few months, my mom was able to get him into a camp for troubled boys in a different state, which I was overjoyed about. After only 3 months there, he began getting violent, and the camp said he couldn't stay there anymore. This was a camp for troubled boys, and yet they couldn't handle a troubled boy. I told my mom I would not live with him anymore, and if he came back, I would move to Ohio to live with my other aunt. My mom didn't want to live with him anymore either, even if he was her son, and told the camp he could not come home. She had to stop taking their calls eventually because they were harassing her at work. She got a message that they had put him into the foster care system. She still emails with him sometimes. All he does is ask her for money. We've talked to mental health professionals, and they've said he sounds like a narcissist. He's 16 now, and it's a constant fear of mine that when he ages out of the system, he's going to come and hurt me and my mom. My family refuses to talk about this. When he was younger and we went to family gatherings, he would act so badly that he would make my mom cry. No one would say anything except to make a comment to my mother about how terribly behaved he was, which was obviously enormously helpful. As he got older, I would have to run to my aunt's house crying. Still no one would talk about it. He even tried to hurt me once, holding me up against a wall by my neck, and would regularly threaten me with knives and his BB gun. I asked if I should call the police, and everyone said no, it wasn't necessary, it would be too dramatic. When I moved into my aunt's house, I was severely depressed, had generalized anxiety disorder, OCD, PTSD, and a fear of men. I was also seeing a therapist who believed she could see ghosts and was weaning me off my antidepressants without consulting my psychiatrist. My aunt and uncle's solution to this was that I needed to power through it, and after a week of staying there, they told me I needed to get a job, or I couldn't live there. I was obviously not mentally stable enough to have a job, so I was forced to move back into the house where I was being abused. I have still not been able to forgive them for that. When my mother decided that my brother couldn't come home, everyone in the family called my mom and asked her if that was really necessary and the right thing to do. The only people who were really helpful during that time were my aunt and uncle in Ohio, who would talk with my mom on the phone about him and who offered me a place to stay when I needed it, even if it was 6 or 7 states away. Now that he's gone, everyone still talks about him like he's fine. They ask, "How's Tyler?" Even though it makes me visibly upset. I think I'll always resent them for this, and it makes me really sad. Story 14. Not my family, but a family I grew up next to had some hefty secrets that we found out about over the years. They had 2 sons around my age that I used to play with, and I started noticing some of my toys, mainly video games that I brought over, would go missing. Then, about a month or so after each disappearance, the kids would suddenly have those exact games and claim their mom bought them. This happened regularly. Years passed, and many toys and games disappeared this way. Eventually, I also lost multiple house keys that I had kept in my backpack, the same one I took to their house to do homework. Toys I knew for sure had been in my room would vanish. That's when my parents started getting suspicious. One night, my mom invited the neighbor's mom over for a New Year's party. Afterward, my mother's wedding ring and some other very expensive jewelry went missing. After that, she wouldn't let me take anything to their house. Then came the turning point. One day my mom came home, heard a loud noise, ran into the living room, and saw our front door wide open, with the neighbor mom running through our backyard. About a week later, her sons were spending the night at our place when my parents got word that the neighbor family was supposedly out of town. That same night, my mom broke into their house and stayed there. She went up into the attic and found it packed with stolen toys and video games, some even labeled with other kids' names. She found a few of my things but couldn't find her wedding ring, which was her main concern. Later that night, the father came home and caught her there. He was surprisingly calm. They talked, and he admitted to his wife's problem and promised to return the ring and anything else they had taken. But a week later, when my parents went to confront them, both parents acted like they had no idea what anyone was talking about. It was devastating for my family. Fast forward to middle school, a friend of mine started hanging out with the neighbor boys, and I heard that his mom and the neighbor mom were becoming close. That Christmas Eve, his house was broken into, and all the presents were stolen. My mom made a call to warn her about the neighbor's mom and what she was capable of. Eventually, we learned that the 2 sons had known about their mother's behavior for their entire lives and had been taught to hide it from a very young age. By the time we got to high school, we began to see just how much damage that secrecy and dysfunction had caused them. She also sabotaged things of mine. She slashed my bike tires. She even cut the brakes on my electric scooter, something that could have ended really badly. At one point, she suspiciously contacted my father after my parents had divorced. And the biggest shocker? We always wondered why the lights were constantly on in the shed. Turns out they were growing marijuana, and this was in an upper-class neighborhood. When we were a little older, a friend of mine actually broke into their house and stole one of the sons' iPods. We knew it was his. We saw him using it on the bus every day. When we went through the photos, we found dozens of weird, posed, corn-style pictures saved on it. Story 15. My grandfather was an officer in the OSS during the Second World War. He officiated the surrender of many German soldiers. One woman he met, a German housemaid, was living in a part of Germany that was to be given to the USSR, knowing the terrible fate that would likely befall her if she stayed. My grandfather got her out by marrying her. Over time, they developed a pretty good relationship. After the war ended, they moved to the United States. With most of her family deceased and speaking little English, she was miserable. My grandpa tried to make her comfortable and keep her happy, but it wasn't enough. About 2 years after they were married, my grandfather, then working as a manager at a textile plant, came home to find her lifeless body hanging in the bathroom. The secret part of this story is that my grandfather had 2 more wives after her. My biological grandmother was the second, and she later died of ovarian cancer. He had 8 children, 3 stepchildren, and more than 50 grandchildren. He told no one about this tragedy except the police. The only reason we found out was because of a dusty, hidden, locked journal he kept until the mid-1950s before abandoning it. Story 16. I am the youngest by far in my family, and I only have older sisters. My dad's brother was a very successful and wealthy lawyer. He got into heavy drug use, and basically over the course of 2 years, he was kicked out of the house and became insane. He would call my dad on his birthday to tell him what a crappy brother he was. My dad is an amazing man, and this really hurt him. Eventually, he threatened the entire family. I remember going to visit my grandma when something scary had happened the day before. When we got there, I could see that somebody had tried to axe their way into her house. I'm not sure why he didn't make it all the way into her house. Maybe she called the cops and he ran. Either way, she was okay. My parents tried to soften the story a little bit for me because I was so young, but I knew that my uncle was out there and wanted to end us. Skip to when I was 12. My dad got a corporate consulting job and was always leaving town for a week at a time on business trips. He had a lot of guns and taught me how to use them, clean them, respect them, etc. I did a lot of shooting, which was awesome. He kept a couple of guns in my room. He said it was because he didn't have room for them all in his closet. He told me not to tell anybody they were there, so I kept quiet about it. I didn't think much of it. He would talk a lot about whether somebody came to the house, and I thought I had to use a gun, that I should worry about protecting the girls, and not worry about getting into trouble, not to hesitate while threatening, while letting somebody get close, etc. Eventually, my uncle offed himself. The next day, my dad took the guns out of my room. That's when I realized he had them there for me to protect the family at 12 years old. This isn't something to talk about with the rest of the family. Honestly, at the time, it didn't seem like that big of a deal having guns in my room. I grew up with them. I've always respected them and knew we had them mostly for play. We would go to the range a lot, but I also knew they were for protection. My dad never specifically told me that I had a couple of them in my room because of my uncle. I do not know why he didn't get them to one of my sisters. I honestly don't. Perhaps it's because I was never one to react in a screwed-up situation. There are quite a few moments in my life where something screwed up happened, and I kept my cool. I honestly think my dad's "it is what it is, and you do what you have to do" attitude rubbed off on me, and maybe this is why he gave me the guns. Story 17. One of my distant cousins was heavy into drugs in the early 80s. On one of his binges, he extracted his eyes and had them. He said it was so he would stop looking at kids and finding them attractive. While no one ever talks about it, my dad told me when I was younger, when I asked who the blind man was at the family reunion, that was his first time being with the family in around 20 years. Due to the power of Thanksgiving, I also asked around and found some more information, as well as startled reactions by some family members about my knowledge. He was in his early 40s in the late 80s. A combination of highly religious feelings, mental health, and feelings for his own daughter and others drove him to the snowy hills. His wife walked in on him when she came home early from work, stopping him from further harm. When I saw him, he was pushing his wife in her wheelchair when she lost her leg to diabetes, so he was her motor, and she was his eyes. He is apparently still alive. His wife is not. I haven't seen him in close to 10 years. When I was told his story as a kid, my dad told me what had happened to him very slowly and seriously. Dad has a moist sense of humor, so I knew he wasn't joking and not to take it lightly. Story 18. I was SA'd by my grandfather when I was really young. Then I was SA'd by my father around the same time. I vaguely remember this. I have 2 brothers. The 13-year-old decided it was a good idea to SA me from the time I was very young, which continued for almost 2 years. My 15-year-old brother caught him in the act and beat him for me, thankfully. It screwed me up for many years. I couldn't trust any guy other than my older brother for years. I assumed all a guy wanted to do was use me to get laid. That's all I've ever been good for. I had a problem with my boyfriend watching porn for years because I felt women were being used and objectified. It was so bad at one point, I felt I was being cheated on if he watched porn. 11 years of therapy made me hate therapists and didn't help me much. I got through it with family and friends, even though only 3 people on the planet, outside therapists and family, know about it. And my friends only know about my brother since I had to explain why he was in prison for so many years. I'm 22 now, and I've seen him maybe twice since I was young, which is not a problem for me. Anyway, I would say I'm finally at 100%. I feel I've made a full recovery. I'm now okay with corn. I watch it myself. I have a boyfriend with a healthy, intimate life and relationship, and I know that's not how all guys are, but I still look over my shoulder all the time. Every day, absent-mindedly. I always carry a mace and an assisted switchblade on me. Story 19. All my childhood. I believed my mother and father were in a relationship but didn't live together. I knew all the family on my mother's side, but none on my father's side. My dad often visited my mother, my siblings and me. But we never visited him. No reason was given, even if asked. But lately I found out that my father has another family, that my mother is simply his lover, and none of us kids were planned. My whole family knows, but it was kept a secret from me and my siblings. But recently I found out by putting two and two together. I still haven't confronted them, but I am waiting for my chance. My siblings still don't know. I love my dad, and I don't want to ruin his life by exposing the secret. I'm just very upset with him for lying to me my whole life, and I really want to talk this through with him, but he is nonetheless my dad, and I know he loves me and took a huge risk by visiting us once a week or more my whole life. Story 20. I was SA'd by my sister, and, in turn, she was SA'd by my father. My cousin also SA'd me, and my sister also SA'd her. They both said that I was the problem, and my mom cried and asked me why I would do such a thing. They are both older than me. I was young and didn't understand what was going on. Since then, it's been forgotten. My family regularly treats me like crap still, and my dad is dead. I'm not in contact with my brother, and my sister, who SA'd me, is super screwed up on drugs and alcohol, and is having a child. I'm low contact, no contact with her. My eldest sister is okay with me. For years I thought it was a dream, until I came out and told an ex-boyfriend. That's my dark secret. That's the reason I am scared to talk to girls and have questioned my sexuality for decades. My family treated me like a monster, including extended family, and I believed I was one. Story 21. My great-grandfather fatally offed a man in London and got away with it. He'd immigrated from Nigeria to work in England, but back in those days, he faced a lot of racism. One particular guy who liked to frequent his favorite local pub really had it in for him, verbally abusing and physically attacking him regularly. One night, after a particularly bad beating, my great-grandfather decided he'd had enough of this guy, so he stumbled home and picked up a kitchen knife. As the guy walked home after a night of drinking, my great-grandfather attacked him repeatedly, threw the knife off a bridge into a river, and ran home. The police questioned him concerning the murder, but there was no substantial evidence. Story 22. Not the most screwed up, but a buddy of mine burnt his entire house down when he was 8 years old playing Indiana Jones and the chipped-out groove of the garage floor with gasoline to see if he could have a fire snake. The case was put down to an electrical fire. It took him until he was in his mid-20s to tell them the truth. The good news is insurance money got him and his family a brand new house and new car, and the money they got saved his dad's business, which then became successful. From his account, it was pretty bad carrying that secret around for so long. Story 23. I actually have a relative, my second cousin, who falls for Nigerian scammers, and he's been sending money to the same Nigerians since before the internet. Guy is a very smart engineer too, and his wife has almost left him numerous times over this. I imagine it's similar to a gambling addiction, except he never gets any reward from it. I should also mention this relative of mine believes in conspiracy theories like how we never landed on the moon and the Holocaust never happened. I think there's a certain type of analytical mind that becomes dangerous, as he knows just enough to believe he knows everything and is smarter than everyone around him. Story 24. I was 9 years old when my mom passed away of cancer. My sister was 10, a mere month after her death. Our lonely and fragile father sought the romantic companionship of our mom's former home care nurse. She took full advantage of his vulnerability and used him for money, ego boosts, and to assert her dominance and power over him, which in turn led to him becoming entirely dependent on her attention to feel any semblance of self-worth. I don't know if my dad had these issues before my mom's death, but he relied heavily on drinking and late-night partying, frequently abandoning my sister and me night after night to participate in the aforementioned activities. My sister and I are so grateful to have each other. We are as close as any two people can be, and we're lucky that neither of us has ever developed any sort of unhealthy addiction or dependency. 9 years later, our dad is doing a lot better and is thankfully no longer in contact with that woman, but she has destroyed my relationship with my dad. I do love him, and this is probably immature of me, but I hold an immense grudge towards him for stripping me of my childhood. Story 25. My grandfather died when I was about 10 or 11 years old. I barely knew him, and it didn't really faze me. My dad didn't like his father, and he seemed fine as well. My dad had 2 brothers, one younger and one older. He was really close with his younger brother, and then suddenly, 6 weeks after my grandfather's death, that brother dropped dead after a fight with his wife. I feel so bad for my dad, because he truly believes his sister-in-law was behind it, even though no clear explanation was ever given for the death. I had 3 cousins. This particular cousin was the middle child and a year older than me. She was really fond of our grandfather, and his death hit her especially hard. Then, on top of that, her father died just 6 weeks later. Can you imagine having 2 of the most important people in your life taken from you within 6 weeks of each other? Last year, on St. David's Day, that middle cousin offed herself life by jumping off a bridge after a fight with her ex-boyfriend. I hardly knew her, and that's probably what I regret the most. But what really gets to me, what I find deeply heartbreaking and messed up, is that this family has now lost their grandfather, father, and sister. Being Welsh, St. David's Day will never be the same for them. It's absolutely tragic. Now, for a secret and a pretty messed up one at that. My uncle on my mother's side has been married to my aunt for about 20 or 21 years. He's a big-shot banker who earns what I would consider a lot of money. For 19 years of that marriage, he has been secretly paying to sleep with S-workers. Not only that, but he also contracted HIV from one of them and has been on medication for years. He's also Catholic. Because they have children who are under the age of 19, they had to get them tested for HIV, in case it had been passed on during pregnancy. Story 26. Shortly after I was born, my mom kept getting headaches, so they did a brain scan and found a benign tumor in her brain. My mom thought she was surely going to die. My dad and the Mormon bishop gave her a priesthood blessing, and the next scan came back clean. Magically, the tumor was gone. It was a miracle, and everyone rejoiced. I've heard this miraculous story my entire life. I found out 2 days ago that my dad had a discussion with the doctor and had him make the benign, inoperable tumor disappear because he knew my mom would never be able to live a normal life if she knew she had that tumor in her head, even if it was benign. So basically, every time my mom has had her head scanned over the past 40+ years, my dad has talked to the doctor each time to make sure she doesn't know this thing is still in her brain. I always questioned how a tumor could just magically disappear like that. Now I know I was being deceived my entire life. Story 27. My brothers started using powder drugs together about 8 years ago. One of them sought treatment and got clean a couple of years ago, but the other only got worse. He would constantly call me or my mom to borrow money for rent, saying his rent was due on Thursday but he didn't get paid until Friday. He always promised he could pay us back after the weekend. My sister couldn't handle the situation and ended up marrying a man in the Air Force, then moving to the other side of the world. Meanwhile, my grandmother took over my parents' home and basically forced them to move out because my aunt lied to her about the rest of the family so she could spend all of her money. One uncle is a paranoid schizophrenic who will shoot on sight if someone he doesn't recognize comes onto his property. It's been years since I last saw him. I grew up with my dad around, but he basically always ignored me because I chose to identify more with my siblings, his stepchildren, than as his son. Due to a medical catastrophe before I was born, my mother was left with only about 35% of her lungs functioning, minor brain damage, and a weakened immune system. The condition, we were always moving around so she wouldn't get sick. If the climate was too cold or wet, she would get pneumonia and need to be hospitalized. If it was too hot or dry, she wouldn't be able to breathe properly and would be bedridden for days or even weeks. So, we moved every 6 months to stay in the perfect climate, back and forth from northern Washington to southern California. I was in kindergarten when this started. My oldest brother was in his senior year of high school. The next oldest brother was in 7th grade, and my sister was in 4th grade. I never really made lasting friendships. Other kids always thought I was that weird kid who kept leaving and showing up every year. I mean, bless my parents. They tried to make it work for us. We would spend summer break in Washington, which was home, and then around November, we'd head down to California for the winter. When spring rolled around and the weather cleared up back home, we would go back. In school, I got picked on, pushed around, and eventually just flat out ignored. I was quiet. I stayed in my room most of the time and played video games. I made a couple of friends with other kids like me, kids who also just sat in their rooms and played video games. My dad always wanted me to be into sports and play baseball. Unfortunately, we moved every year during the season for every sport, so that never really happened. My dad started drinking when I was in 4th or 5th grade, and he began getting into fights with my older brother. Later, I found out it was because my brother was trying to protect me and keep him out of my room when he got drunk. My sister became one of the anime kids, and I'm pretty sure she's secretly a furry judging by her DeviantArt page. She got married right out of high school to one of her anime friends. He joined the Air Force, and they both moved to Japan and had a child. My oldest brother never moved with us. He stayed up north and hasn't left the small town we grew up in. I don't think he's ever been more than an hour away from that town, and he's in his 30s now. I never really knew my extended family that well. Our branch of the family tree didn't quite fit in with the rest. While my grandpa was still alive, he and my grandmother lived in Everett, Washington, and all my aunts and one uncle lived in Snohomish, which is really just a suburb of Everett. At one point, my grandparents owned one of the larger dairy empires in the Northwest. My grandfather started with almost nothing, and through sheer toughness, determination, and a willingness to get his hands dirty with hard work, he built a successful business and made his family wealthy. Growing up, he always planned for my mother to take over the family business, but that didn't quite work out. One winter, my mom came down with a severe case of pneumonia, but her doctors initially misdiagnosed it as merely inflamed lung tissue. After about a week, she was correctly diagnosed with adult respiratory distress syndrome and fell into a coma. My family was told they should probably just pull the plug. She remained in a coma for 6 months before suddenly waking up in the hospital hooked up to all sorts of machines and tubes. Even then, doctors didn't expect her to live more than another 5 years, tops. 2 years later, she became pregnant with me. I'm 21 now, and she's still going strong. The woman refuses to give up. She's always been an inspiration to me. After she got sick, my grandfather had to sell the farm to help cover the hospital bills. The rest of the family always silently resented her for that. As I grew older and entered middle school, my 2 brothers had both moved out, and my sister was still living at home. My grandpa had Alzheimer's and was slowly dying. After he passed, things really went downhill. The family got greedy. Everyone became cutthroat, talking about each other behind backs. All my aunts and uncles started turning into awful people, except for the one who was convinced the FBI was watching him and his family while they slept. He stayed just as crazy as always. Eventually, the inheritance was divided up, and everyone received their fair share. One of my aunts never actually moved away, and continued to live with my grandmother up until now. She's 45. She was a horse girl who never really grew up. She has brainwashed my grandmother into believing that everyone else is trying to steal from her. When my grandmother and aunt went broke, my parents decided to let them move into their house in Washington. Over the past 3 or 4 years, they have mostly been kicked out, and their home was taken over. Now, my grandmother won't talk to me anymore if I call that house, and she answers. Story 28. My granddad came to Canada in 1917 with nothing, no money, and only the clothes on his back. He settled in Saskatchewan and worked as a farmhand, which was incredibly hard work at the time. He never once spoke to anyone about his life in England, not even to Grandma. When he was nearing the end of his life, he produced an album and began showing it to my dad, with whom he was close. The album revealed his life in England. He grew up on a country estate and was raised by a nursemaid. He had a private tutor, countless maids, and evidently his parents were very wealthy. The strange part is, he never explained how he ended up, at 17, working as a farmhand in Canada. Nobody knows, and we are not in contact with our relatives in England. Story 29. My grandfather served in the IRA in the 1920s. He was a De Valera man, so he actually fought against Michael Collins during the Battle of Dublin. A few of my uncles followed in his footsteps, and our family became well known as an IRA family. I have one uncle who is probably still involved in some capacity, but he keeps to himself. Needless to say, whenever we visit home, we've been told that if anyone messes with us, we're just to say who we are, and that's enough to end the fight right there. My husband's family is Sicilian with major ties to the Rizzuto crime family in Montreal. We're pretty sure his dad uses mafia connections all the time. My husband says he met Vito Rizzuto at his Nona's funeral only a year before Vito was arrested. We joke all the time that we're uniting the mafia with the IRA and together we're a force to be reckoned with. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.